welcome to episode 5 of the Indie Author Mindset podcast with me, Adam Croft. Apologies if I sound a bit croaky or bunged up, but I'm currently fighting some lovely germs my delightful son has brought home with him. And of course, one of the benefits of this podcast being short and sweet is that my voice only has to hold out for 10 or 15 minutes, so fingers crossed it does. First of all, thank you to everyone who's been sharing this podcast in the various Facebook groups and writing circles. I have noticed a huge increase in listeners in the last week or so welcome to everyone who's just discovering the podcast for the first time, and huge thanks to everyone who's been telling people about it. Please do let all your writer friends know, and of course feel free to mention the podcast in any writing or publishing Facebook groups you're in. I've spent the past week or two working on my next mini course for writers, as well as planning the next 3 of them, which will be in production very shortly. The latest course, the new one, is called Productivity for Writers, and it focuses on methods and strategies you can use to write more books and increase your publishing output, all without compromising on quality. The course dives into the psychology behind productivity, including things like flow, spirals, and procrastination. And in the course, I go through some of the tools, strategies, and methods I've used to double and, in fact, nearly triple my output and get more done. And as most of you would already know, being productive and releasing books more often is one of the most successful ways to increase your income from writing and to build a strong, solid audience that will provide you with a long-term publishing and writing career. Now, the course shows you how to get into the zone and achieve that much sought-after flow state, beat procrastination, how to deal with self-doubt, and it is, quite frankly, the motivational kick up the backside that all writers need at some point in their career, and usually lots more than once. It's yours for life, of course, as with all my courses, including any future updates and revisions, so you can keep going back to it as and when you need it. It should be live by the time you hear this. I'm putting it live the same day as I record this podcast, so check out courses.indieauthormindset.com for the Productivity for Writers course. Of course, as a listener to the Indie Author Mindset podcast, you're entitled to get any of my courses at half price using the promo code podcast at the checkout. As always, I'm very keen to hear your thoughts, your questions, your problems when it comes to writing and publishing. Just fire me an email at podcast@indieauthormindset.com or catch me in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group. On which note, Emma Oakey was in the group this week. She left me a question. She said, "Hi Adam, I'm really enjoying your podcast. It's informative, funny, and succinct." I like you already, Emma. And she says, "You asked for questions, so I've got one. In your experience, what is the optimum length and price for a fiction book?" Well, Emma, personally, I've found that length really doesn't matter. At least that's what my wife tells me to make me feel better. But in all seriousness, I've got books that range from 1,000 word short stories right up to 85,000 word novels. And basically, as long as you make it clear that your short story or novella is a short story or a novella, you tend to avoid any problems and pitfalls. I would say price accordingly, of course, but there is no set rule. I tend to price my short stories at 99p or 99 cents. My novellas are normally $1.99 and my full novels are $3.99. But I have not got this set in stone. I am completely flexible and willing to change that and adapt as I see fit. On pricing, I survey my readers every year, and one of the questions I asked them is how much they'd be prepared to pay for one of my full-length novels. Now, bear in mind, I usually charge $3.99 for them, and I have done for a couple of years now. For my most recent survey, I had around 2,500 readers who took part, and the results were pretty encouraging on this front, actually. Only 5.3% of my mailing list said they read only free ebooks, which is very good, considering a large majority of them will have ended up on the list after seeing a free book advert or a list builder I've taken part in, where the books were given away for free in exchange for them signing up. So for only 5% of them to say they only read free ebooks is very encouraging. Most of my readers seem to be perfectly happy with my current price point, and 23.5% of them said they would happily pay more. So that's nearly a quarter of my readership would happily pay even more for my books. 8% of them said they would pay over $6 for one of my books. That's potentially twice as much as I'm charging now, nearly. On top of that, in November of last year, 2019, I released Absolution, which is a book I co-wrote with Stephen Moore. During that pre-order period, I polled my Facebook readers group and I asked them whether they'd pre-ordered Absolution, and if not, why not? Now bear in mind, the pre-order was at the full price of $3.99. There was no pre-order discount at all, straight in at full price. 122 of my readers in the Facebook group responded to that poll, and of that, only 2 of them said it was too expensive. Now, of course, I'm well aware that I've been writing and publishing for a decade and that I've got a strong and dedicated readership. So writers who are at the start, the beginning end of their careers, will need to price at a level that gives them maximum exposure and helps them to build that readership. But it just goes to show that pricing is a much more fluid thing than most authors realise, and that most readers aren't as price sensitive as we might think. When it comes to how long the book should be, I would always advise that any book should be as long as it naturally ends up. As indie authors, we've got the luxury of being able to make sure our books are as tight as possible and that they flow naturally without having to pad them out with fluff or meet some artificially set word count. We don't have publishers breathing down our necks telling us a book has to be this size, and readers really, genuinely don't care. They're after pace and quality of the writing. They're not bothered about how long the book is, as long as you're pricing accordingly and not charging $5 for a 1,000 word short story. So take advantage of that and write the best book you can. The only time you need to even look at the word count is out of pure interest after you've finished writing the book, to see, out of interest, how long it was. Now, to celebrate my new course, Productivity for Writers, I'm going to give you completely free, gratis, not 1, not 2, but 3 top tips for increasing your productivity and getting more writing done. First of all, I would say productivity is all about organising your life and your day in general. If you're not already a lister, make sure you become one. Make sure you have your to-do list with each task for the day, and start with the toughest or most daunting task on your list each day. That way, everything else will seem progressively easier and your day will only get better. This task that you are least looking forward to, the most daunting task, is also usually much easier and far less stressful than you think it's going to be. So that will give you a massive confidence and motivation boost as a result, which you can take into the rest of your working day. I would also suggest tip 2, to keep your mind on the end goal. Something I tend to do when I'm writing my books is make sure I get the cover designed nice and early on. I have that in front of me, spurring me on, allowing me to see that final finished product right there in front of me. When you can see the end goal, you are much more likely to hit that target and to allow you to spur yourself on to get that book written. My third tip is an app that I have found very useful for keeping myself focused and taking away distractions. The app is called Forest. It's available for Android and for iPhone, and I think it's available for pretty much any smartphone you like. It helps you stay focused by planting virtual trees. When you want to focus, you plant a tree, and all the time you're not using your phone, your trees will carry on growing. Forest doesn't let you leave the app. If you do, your tree will die. And the idea is you leave your phone to one side and cultivate your forest in the background while you focus on working and writing. So you're not just answerable to yourself, but you're also keeping these precious trees alive. Now, you might say, well, they're only digital trees. They're not real. How does that count? Well, the guys at Forest have teamed up with Trees for the Future, and they will plant real trees around the world based on the success of your forest. So while you're not using your phone and while you're spending your time on working and writing, Trees for the Future are planting real trees around the world in your honour. So get hold of the Forest app for your phone from whichever your app store is that you use, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or something else, and get going with that. That would be one of my top tips. In the course Productivity for Writers, we look at some more apps, websites and products that I've used to boost my productivity, and as always, these are true and honest recommendations and endorsements. I receive no money from any of the recommendations I make during the Productivity for Writers course, and I have no affiliation with any of the developers or the companies. And of course, I'll be sharing my own personal writing zone, and I've even thrown in my Spotify playlist that I use for writing for good measure. Now, the ninja tip is back, folks. Thank you to those of you who have missed it. I certainly haven't. But new year, new me. I'm going to try and embrace the ninja. So here is this week's Indie Author Mindset Podcast Ninja Tip. Look who's talking. Looking at the source of information is key to knowing who to trust and who to listen to. Credentials are a valid and crucial filter. Any industry always has plenty of people who set themselves up as experts and who are keen to share their opinions, particularly online. And I should know, I'm one. Always check out the person's background, level of success and reputation before deciding how much weight to give to that advice or opinion, especially if you're going to part with any money. And remember that no one path to success is ultimately replicable. Just because it's worked for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Feel free to blaze your own trail and do things differently. That in itself can make you stand out sufficiently to get noticed. And finally, a funny little note to end on. I got an email earlier this week from Spotify inviting me to delve into the data they provide me with in terms of the podcast stats. Apparently, you lot are 64% male and 36% female, and your most listened to music artists are Eminem and Michael Bublé. Read into that what you will. Thank you for listening and for all of your continued support. I genuinely really do appreciate all of your feedback, good and bad. As I said earlier, I'm very keen that this podcast gives you exactly what you need. So if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover, questions you'd like me to answer, or anything else at all, just fire me an email at podcast@indieauthormindset.com or catch me in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group. Now, please do remember to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And I will see you back here next time for episode 6. Take care. This episode of the Indie Author Mindset podcast was presented by me, Adam Croft. The theme music for this podcast is by the Caesareans. Don't forget you can claim 50% off any Indie Author Mindset course by entering the promo code podcast at the checkout. Links are in the show notes. For more great tips and guidance, join the Indie Author Mindset group on Facebook.